I would like to share an embroidery stitch with everyone today. It concerns something called the Colonial Knot. It's very similar to a French knot, and as I was learning to embroider as a child, I struggled quite a bit with French knots because they were tricky to do and I never did them very well. Even as a young adult, I was not that good at it. But so that you can compare the two methods, I'm going to start by demonstrating a French knot. With a French knot, you're going to come up from the back side of the fabric and you place the needle close to the fabric surface and then you wrap 2 or 3 times. Reinsert your needle. I find it's best not to go right back into the same hole because the knot may pop through. You want it real close, and then you pull it through. Well, the trouble with a French knot, depending on the threads you're using, is that those loops can come loose. This one already did a bit. It looks a little bit loopy and snarly. And it's because of the way that the coils of thread are wrapped around the needle. It leaves them open to get loose before you've tightened the knot. And in particular, if you're using a springy thread like rayon or something like that, it's a real problem. A few years back, a friend who was into Brazilian embroidery taught me how to do a colonial knot. And the colonial knot was actually a godsend to me because it solves many of the problems that you get with the French knot. It is a little more complicated, and you don't see it illustrated as often in embroidery books as you do the French knot because it's remarkably hard to illustrate. It's something that's much easier to learn by watching. And I've seen a lot of videos on how to do this, but I've sort of developed a way that I think works for me that I think might explain it with better ease for people. So to do a colonial knot, again, you're going to emerge with your needle from the fabric. And what I like to do at this point, it's a two-handed process, is I pull the thread towards myself here. And if you're a right-handed embroiderer, you're going to put your needle like this, across from the right towards the left, angled up. And it's really important that you put your index finger under this to hold it in place because your next move is to swing it under like that. And then the thread that's still held by the left hand gets wrapped over the top the opposite direction. What in essence this does, if you can sort of see it there, is it forms a figure 8 around your needle instead of just loose coils. Once again, you want to come back at a point very close. But the beauty of this, although I do still recommend you control the thread, but the beauty here is that the coils are not going to be trying to work their way loose like it does in the French knot. And so after you pull it through, you're more likely to get a nice, tight, snug knot that really resembles to the casual eye a French knot, but without all the hassle. It also, from what I've read, takes a little bit less thread to do this. So once more, you emerge from the fabric, set the work down so you can hold the thread with your left hand, and if with a right hand, you cross from the right towards the left with the needle pointing up at that diagonal angle, and hold it with your index finger while you sweep under. If you tried to do that without it, this is what happens. You just would not be able to snag it. So this index finger is important. Sweep it under, wrap the other way, reinsert the needle, snug it down, pull it through, and there you have a nice little perfect colonial knot. When I started making colonial knots, my reflex reaction was to default to the French knot, and it did take me probably about a month of consciously trying to remember to do the colonial knot before it became second nature. But now this is my default. And in fact, if I'm trying to demonstrate the French knot for people, I really have to think what I'm doing because the colonial knot has become my go-to knot. So I hope you try this. It really makes making these little knots much easier and pleasurable than the traditional French knot. And I thank you for watching.